Welcome to Dungeon Academics. My name is Thomas and I will be your instructor. Given that I follow a lot of Dungeons and Dragons channels on YouTube and a lot of creators on Instagram, a significant portion of the adverts I get in social media are for Dungeons and Dragons related products. And every so often a Kickstarter will be advertised that I quite like the look of. I have backed many of them. I think some of them are genuinely wonderful. I'm generally quite happy with the ones I've followed. And one's popped up quite recently that I'd like to talk about today. Just to get it out of the way, I'm in no way affiliated, associated, endorsed or sponsored by them. I'm just talking about them as a point of someone who is interested in the hobby. And this is a product by Everon Games called Ready, Set, Encounter Volume 1. It is essentially a nice themed set of minis for Dungeons and Dragons and other similar style games. They've gone for a dragon theme, so there's some kobolds riding giant lizards, some dragon cultists, a few dragons. Then there's also terrain tiles. I think at the higher tier there's some terrain pieces as well. Stat blocks, of course, they mentioned D&D 5th edition, both versions, 2014 and 2024, plus Daggerheart, which I think is quite nice to have like a multi-system rules in there as well. And a set of encounters, combat encounters. I mean, their shtick is epic combat encounters with zero prep. And that's great. Sometimes as a dungeon master, you just want to be able to drop an encounter in and go, okay, here are these guys, what are you going to do? The models look pretty good quality, so that's very nice. And the whole project is being endorsed by Ginny D and Bob Worldbuilder, who are both Dungeons and Dragons creators who have a lot of credibility. They've put a lot of time into their channels, their hobby, and I generally have a lot of respect for what they have to say. So if they're saying it's a good product, that would convince me. You get to make that decision yourself. What I will say, though, is that there's a couple of points that I'd like to make which are particularly relevant to me. And firstly, I think I heard Bob Worldbuilder say that it was built so that it could be used across different tiers. And I had an idea a few videos back which would be really good for that. I still have the props for it here. I made myself this and this and this. Just as a very brief introduction, as a proof of concept, imagine this is a rotatable wheel and the boxes are all different numbers, values, symbols, whatever. The ones in black are a unique set, and the ones in grey are just repetitions of that set rotated, and therefore with different values. And if you were to place your click wheel behind a tile like this, these black rectangles would be cutouts, and they'd show where something goes through. And if you have this click wheel behind it, every time you rotate it 45 degrees, you'll get a different set of values. So if you're writing stat blocks for creatures and you want these creatures to be scalable, you want to be able to level them up for when your players become more proficient, become better, or need a slightly tougher challenge, just a couple of little clicks on that wheel and now you have a slightly tougher monster. And by being able to have 8 different levels of potency, you now have a set of stat blocks with associated miniatures that can be used many times across many different tiers of play and still provide a challenge and still be different every time you fight them. When you fight that band of 8 kobolds when you're level 1, they are weak and pathetic, but there's still 8 of them and that's a challenge. When you come back at level 5 and you meet them again, they're going to be a lot tougher. They've got more loot, they've got more abilities, more experience, they're tougher. So are you. So those same miniatures and those same stat blocks are now scaled to match you. And again, simple case, if you have players who are just better at working together. They know how their characters work. A standard challenge rating fight isn't tough for them. Click, click, click. Now it is. This is an idea. A product where you have a set of miniatures and a set of stat blocks, and you want it to be useful across multiple tiers of play, including something like this design would be really cool in that box. So if I was in any way associated with that Kickstarter, I'd be saying, hey, you should include these as a way to show the mutable stat blocks that your creatures have, and it's just something nice that the Dungeon Master gets to play with. The other thing I'd want to do about this campaign that I do slightly differently is change the emphasis on the encounters, because they sell it as cinematic, heroic combat encounters. And if you're buying miniatures are most likely to be used in combat scenarios. You don't set up a map and terrain and all the miniatures for roleplay encounters. You really do that mainly for combat encounters. But if you sell an encounter as a combat encounter, it will play out as a combat encounter. I'm playing a RPG, a different system, one that won't be named at this point because I don't want to put any spoilers in for my players. And what I've done is, instead of setting up encounters, I've created a web of groups that have needs. And then how these needs are met is up to the players. Now, you can do this across any system whatsoever. So instead of setting up as, here is a dragon cult, you have to fight them, you set it up as, here are some groups, here are the relationships between those groups. Which groups do you want to assist and how do you want to do it? Let's say, for example, at some point in the future, they made a goblin tribe project. And in it, there was a bunch of various goblin miniatures. You've got goblin skirmishers, you've got armored goblin warriors, you've got goblins riding spiders, a few goblin shamans, maybe a couple of trolls thrown in there as well. So maybe some boar or wolf riders. A lot of the ideas I have for goblin miniatures are definitely very Warhammer inspired, but I do have a long history of playing Warhammer, so that's probably why. Goblins are cool. A set of cool goblin miniatures. What you could then do is describe the relationship that that tribe of goblins has with other geographically local organizations, groups, towns, whatever. Maybe there is a human town nearby. Maybe there's a tribe of orcs. Maybe there's a tribe of ogres up in the mountain. Maybe there's some uncivilized trolls. Aren't all trolls uncivilized? Less civilized trolls than the ones that they've got working with them down in the swamps. A selection of other groups, organizations, clans, cults, whatever, that at some point could get their own box of miniatures and encounters as well. And what you then do is you describe the relationships they have, the needs they have, and how these interact with the other groups. Let's say the orcs. The relationship with the orcs and goblins is mostly peaceful, but every now and then the orcs come down, beat the goblins up, and just press gang a lot of them into the orc horde. And wherever the orcs go to war, they have this skirmishing screen of goblins that they send out first. The life expectancy for these goblins is pretty short, and they definitely don't get a fair share of the loot if they survive. So you could then explain in a little booklet the relationship between the orcs and the goblins. What are the grievances that the goblins have against the orcs? They don't mind being press gang. They see that as part of the natural order of things. But what they object to is not getting a say in tactics. They're always used as battle fodder, and damn it, goblins have brains too. They should get a say in what goes on. So maybe they want you to talk to the orcs on their behalf and persuade them to take a more active role in leadership decisions. Maybe the orcs haven't been paying them a fair share of loot, and the goblins know where the orcs' loot cave or loot pit is, and they want you to go in and recover some loot for them. Maybe a particular orc has been very brutal and they would like him dealt with. What you're now doing is you're setting up a set of needs, and by presenting one of them to the players can then choose, okay, how are we going to resolve this? How are we going to help the goblins if that's something we want to do? Is there something the goblins have that we want, and by helping them with this, they would help us? And the players can now choose how to enact that need, how to fulfill it, what to do. Is it a combat encounter? Is it a stealth mission? Is it a diplomatic mission? It doesn't have to be a fight, but it might be. Now, if you're selling the goblin miniatures, perhaps it makes more sense to show the other nearby tribes' relationships with the goblins, so that if you are going to have a combat encounter or a stealth encounter, then you are showing it from the other group's perspective. So for the humans, maybe they do some trade with the goblins, and the goblins haven't been fulfilling their set of their bargain. What would a local human tribe want to trade for goblins? Fungus wine, livestock, weaponry, minerals, safe passage through a particularly nasty bit of swamp. So the humans want a diplomatic mission to re-establish these trades. Maybe the goblins have stolen a religious artifact and they want humans want it recovered. That could be a combat mission, it could be a raid. But by creating a web of relationships between the organization or group that you're making the miniatures of and those around them, you now have encounters that are not already set up as combat encounters. They could be combat encounters, but they don't have to be. And the nice thing about not going straight in with a combat encounter is that you can then go back in and do another mission with the same group. And only at some point in the future, if you decide to go scorched earth, does that sort of end any possible relationships. So how would I do it differently? I wouldn't set up combat encounters. I'd set up a web of groups, and I'd show the relationships between those groups. I'd show the needs and potential conflict between those groups, and I'd also show what those groups have to offer. So instead of saying, here's a tribe of goblins, go and fight them, again, nothing wrong with combat encounters, but instead say, the human town has a goblin problem, and then pick one from the list, and then ask your players how they want to resolve it. Now, if they decide to do a combat encounter, you have a set of miniatures ready, you have the stat blocks that are scalable to their level, you have various tactics and combat encounter cards to make unique and exciting combats, and that's great. But if they decide to do something else, you also have a booklet of background information, you have the characters, their resources, the needs of the organization. Let's say the humans want safe passage through the swamp for their trade caravans. You go to the goblins on a diplomatic mission. The goblins say, yeah, we'll do that, but we want this favor from this group. And now you're setting up a web of linked missions rather than just having an unconnected combat encounter. Now, I've been running a system very like that for my players, set in a town in Texas in the 1970s. They're high school students, and the main groups are the 20 different cliques in the school. And my players and the students they play have their own needs. These are the things we want to do. And every time they go, well, could I do this? Do I know anyone that could help me do this? It's like, well, yeah, that group could help you. So they have to then go and talk to that group, and that group will probably want to help them in exchange for one of their issues. And sometimes the other group's issues link in a third group, sometimes it doesn't. But I've got this really rich web of interconnected quests, and all I had to do was set it up was make a list of these organizations, make a list of their resources, and write down what they needed. Now, this is something that you could include in a little booklet with your Kickstarter, with your set of miniatures, and it's not the stat blocks that are the most important thing. It's not the miniatures that are the most important thing. It's this potential web of side quests and missions that your players get to decide what to do. If they're the kind of players that everything is a combat mission, sure, they go and get everything they need by fighting. And that probably comes with its own problems, because people are a lot less likely to help if they know that you try to solve every problem with your fists. On the other hand, if you try to solve every mission diplomatically, that can change the opinion of other groups to thinking that maybe you're someone that they can exploit because you're unwilling to do violence. That's a great position to put your players in. Have them decide how they want to solve encounters, and have them understand that the different approaches they take have different repercussions. That's the kind of thing that would really help a dungeon master out. Sure, having a set of combat encounters that are really great combat encounters, that's a nice thing to be able to drop onto the board and just go, let's do this, no prep needed. But with the same amount of prep, i.e. none, having this little booklet and saying, okay, you come across a town, they've got a goblin problem, this is it, how do you want to solve it? You've now got player agency involved. They can choose how they want to approach the problem. They can decide how they're going to do it. And if they want to fight it, great. You've got the models, you've got the battle maps, you've got the epic combat encounter already set up. So that would be what I would do for projects like this. I think things like this are great. I love seeing the amazing independently produced products that really have made Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition the hobby that it is. And all the time I see, this is great, let's make the next one even better. That's how I would improve a project like this. I'd love to hear what you think on this, and enjoy your next game, whatever it may be.